Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we have a very special crossover episode with the Monster Movie Happy Hour podcast. Hello guys, I will introduce you. I'm Bill Coleman, and we're here to talk about the 1983 film The House of Long Shadows. I'm really excited to talk about this. This is probably, I don't know if this is going to be a Monster Movie Happy Hour episode, but for Castle of Horror, this is episode 329. So,
wow.
Yeah, thank you. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about The House of Long Shadows from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. So, I'm going to do this quick, or else it'll take half an hour to introduce us. Then we'll do our opening thoughts. So, we're the usual members of the Castle of Horror. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher of Castlebridge Media. With us from Austin are Ringo-nominated writer and creator of indie comic Halloween Man, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hello.
And survivor of the Snowpocalypse.
No,
yes.
kidding.
Snowpocalypse team number one.
Yes. Also in Austin, tech director at Rooster Teeth, Deserts of Mars frontman, Tony Salvaggio. Hello.
Howdy.
Guys, first of all, before I move on, seriously, kudos for surviving. Our hearts have gone out to you.
We're
guys.
so glad you're here with power and water and heat.
Yeah.
At least water, even if it's not necessarily drinkable, but at least you're here.
Yeah. So who among you is still on a boil notice?
I am.
Drew is, yeah.
Yeah.
We were until yesterday.
Water comes out of your tap. You have to put it in a pot and boil it.
You have to put it in a pot and boil it if you want to use it to cook or drink or brush your teeth or anything like that. I actually have a pretty thorough list from the city of Austin about what you can and can do. You can use it to wash your clothes. You're recommended to run your washing machine on hot though. If you can use your dishwasher if you have one. However, you are recommended to run it on hot. Basically, the key thing is heat. And if you aren't able to get hot water and you have to clean dishes, they are recommending you are rinsing it with bleach, which sounds like an accident waiting to happen. But there we go. This has been a crazy experience, like I am not someone that likes sunny weather as on a whole because I'm goth like that, but like I was so happy when the sun came out towards the end of this week. Like I just I feel like our poor city and all the people in it have just been put through the ringer, and I haven't even had it as bad as some people. Thankfully, first of all, Jamie is a very intelligent lady, and she's from the Northeast, so she's been through all kinds of snowy weather. And, when our power went out, the very first thing she did was pack all our food and put it outside because, of course, it was freezing outside. So we were able for a few days to eat food that way. And then when our water went out, some friends of ours took us in, and they thankfully had both power and water. They never lost it. And they let us stay with them for a few days. But I've had friends, in particular, Jamie's drummer from her band, Sarah, like her boyfriend's father has been living with them because he had a stroke, and he ran out of insulin because you have to keep it in a fridge, and they didn't have anything. And so like they had to scrounge insulin, and he ended up having to use cat insulin from a vet. And they by the end of the week they were burning furniture in a fireplace to stay warm. And that stories like that were not uncommon. And just seeing, there was two takeaways that I personally had from this. It was seeing failure of our state infrastructure, our state government to take care of its citizens in the most basic levels, and that sort of incompetence. But then seeing our community really come together to take care of each other, and people taking each other in, and people under dangerous conditions running firewood to people, driving, to pick people up, walking in the snow in some cases, people really stepping up to take care of each other. So like, even though I have never been less proud in our state's government, I have never been more proud to be a Texan, because I saw that resilience that Texas is known for in our citizens.
Thank you for sharing that. It gives me chills.
And
Thank you.
Rain and I were fairly lucky, but still to echo Drew, we didn't have the same kind of problems, but I had friends, I knew people who were hacking up fences. I knew people who were 5 days or more without, up to a week of no power, no water, and then people helping them. And it's weird because I don't think people really understand, especially I got kind of tired of people being really smug on social media. It wasn't just snow. I've been snowed in on Long Island and got to watch how that works. That isn't how it works here. Right. And I don't think enough people know, what it's like. Like Drew, I would have loved to have offered Drew to stay here or to help, but getting from South Austin to where I live, which is past North Austin, it would have been dangerous. And
you might have been on the
manner
moon.
of things can happen because our infrastructure just isn't. Yeah, our infrastructure just isn't set up to help with that.
They don't have plows.
While we were okay, I tried to help where I could and give money to places and do whatever. But even if you were okay, there's a feeling of helplessness, and also how can we so many things in our infrastructure failed. A lot of it due to greed and just ineffectual things that nobody, and none of the people who were in that could have fixed anything. Like, it's not like we could go fix, 10 years ago, fix the power grid that failed us, despite the fact that they were told, hey, fix this when it happened.
Right. This wasn't anything having to do with the bad choices on the part of citizens. It's way beyond your hands.
And on top of that, it's like what they were saying in the news. Like, this is a 500-year anomaly.
Right. Yeah, of course. So none of this, this is.
I keep seeing our government say that, and nowadays, I don't know that we can be so sure about that. We may have this next winter. This could be our new normal.
Well, they were saying that 10 years ago there was that deep freeze that they were saying we need to fix this because it's going to be catastrophic if it happens again. So they knew, they just didn't want to. It was too expensive to winterize things, so they're like,
too expensive, meaning we won't make as much profit.
We won't make as much profit, right?
Like, it's not too expensive considering somebody can pay
definitely
for it.
The amount of money, if we're not even talking about lives and health, the amount of money that the state is losing because of this definitely outweighs how much money it would have cost to prepare for it.
All I know is that if I am ever in the same vicinity as Ted Cruz, he better walk on the other side of the street, or I'm going to knock that fucking mullet off his head.
When you go to Cancun and you're at the Ritz-Carlton,
Someone sent a mariachi band to serenade outside of his house, though. So that's it.
I'm really glad. That also makes me happy that the mariachi band got paid. Like in other words, that somebody had a gig through all this. I want to finish introducing people, and then I have some thoughts. I want to get back to some of this because it's too interesting not to leave there. We are going to talk about House of Long Shadows, but I want to continue that conversation. But I feel like I owe it to our guests to make people know who those voices are. So first of all, as always, we do have color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. And then joining us are historical book illustrator David Geister of the Monster Movie Happy Hour. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome back. We haven't seen you guys since Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right.
Yes. Historian and self-proclaimed farm mama Mary Challman. Say hello.
Hello.
And finally, historian, raconteur, cocktail wizard, Scott Chesebrouugh.
Thank you. You're extremely kind.
Thank you. So all of us who weren't with you guys down in Texas, I know we watched in just horror as the snow sets in. It was just like Katrina. The storm sets in, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And, as the days go on, you kind of realize that you're looking at this slow moving.
Well, I mean, it starts off with the 100-car pileup in Fort Worth because of the black ice and just goes from there.
And we didn't know that was the prologue to the whole story.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be. Julia has taken all this so seriously that our living room is a staging ground for how we're going to survive the apocalypse here.
Because I had, stuff like the COVID survival kit of like the cans, we've got some toilet paper, whatever. But then I was like, okay, guys, tell me what I need to have if this ever
those of you who lived
here.
through it this year.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, you need to have, so I've ordered like camping stoves and, chlorine tablets, water. What do you call the tablets that you put in to make water drinkable? Yeah. All that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, we're just going to, and all the headlight, people have been saying headlamps, so that you can walk around. And
is there anything, I know it's painful for you guys, and I apologize, Drew and Tony, but is there anything that you would recommend that people run out and get or do, with this experience kind of slowly getting better now?
Water and firewood, you never know. I mean, that's been the two handiest things, I think. And the thing that I think a lot of people wouldn't think, but get yourself, if the temperatures drop cold again, like having an ice chest that you can just put outside and put your meats and your produce in to keep it cold, like, because it got to a point that it was colder outside than it was in our operating refrigerator. Those are the sort of things that I would tell people to prepare for this, which is because of course nobody in Texas thinks like this, because look, it snowed frequently enough where I grew up as a kid, but never anything like this. Like this was a whole other level. I just don't think people think about it.
Yeah, we didn't have candles, which we thought we had, so that was something. Lots of containers to hold water, or to hold, like, when you boil stuff or need to have just water, or like ice chests, like
when
you're
it's
talking about,
like you're about to lose water and fill up.
Yeah. So we didn't, we were like, oh, well, we had some containers, but we're buying more. Another thing that if you're a tech person like myself, I have these APC backup batteries, so that if I lose power, I can shut my computers down safely. Or if there's a spike in power, it absorbs that, like it's a breaker. And they're kind of expensive. You have to replace the batteries like every 3 years. It's around between $100 and $200 for one of these things. But if you need to, you can unplug it, you can turn it off, and then only turn it on when you need it, and you can charge things with it. So unplug all your computer stuff, plug in your phone charger or whatever. We have them on all our computers because that's part of what I do, is I have to have my technology work. So we lucked out in that. But that was something that not everybody has, but if you have electronics, it's worth having it. But in this case, if we had needed it, I could have power cycled that, and that's really handy. I think APC and CyberPower are the two ones that we use the most at my jobs and at my house. But anyway, I kind of just, I hope that we're not boring the listeners too much. Because I want to talk about, I'm kind of done with the snow.
So, House of Long Shadows. I'm going to let Drew do the first opening thoughts. I'll read this real quick. House of Long Shadows is a 1983 comedy horror film, supposedly directed by Pete Walker. It is. I'm just saying, I could not necessarily tell that from watching it. That's not necessarily a dig. I actually don't know. It is a notable. It is noticeable because 4 iconic horror film stars. This is true. Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and John Carradine. That is a heck of a bill. Are together in one feature. That this is a supergroup movie. The screenplay is by Michael Armstrong. It's based on a classic play by Earl Derbiggers called 7 Keys to Baldplate, which in turn is based on a novel. And the original score was composed by Richard Harvey. So I would like the opening thoughts to come from Drew, and also Drew, the final thought on the snow, although you may well come back of it, is that one of the first things that happened after you guys kind of found yourself back at your place is I want to do the show. And so welcome back, and opening thoughts.
I wanted this was going to give me that sense of normalcy. I really wanted to do this show. I was looking forward to it, and to have that after the week I have, and to come back and to chat with everyone about, and just watch a stupid movie, really. The fact that I have power to put a Blu-ray into my Blu-ray player and watch a movie is, and just have that, it seems like so basic. It just made me happy. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be with all of you, and that I made it through the other side of this. I, like Tony, though, I think I want a lot more normal and a lot less like this living in interesting times thing is getting to be a bit for the birds. Let's maybe space out the crises, let's not have them all at once. So House of the Long Shadows, I have a lot of nostalgic feelings for this movie. I first saw it on videotape back in the 80s. I actually still have my VHS copy of this movie. So I do have to view it partly through that nostalgic lens. It is cool that it has all these iconic horror stars in it. It is a bit of an odd duck of a movie because it is very much a 1930s or 1940s, what they would call an old dark house movie, but it was made in the 80s. And in fact, actually, now that I have the Blu-ray of it and I can look at the special features, that was actually by design, because the director and the screenwriter went to pitch this to the Gullin Globulus. I'm not pronouncing that right. The Canon Films guys. And they had a film called Deliver Us from Evil, which was about a mutant fetus that springs to life and starts eating people, and it sounded like kind of like the It's Alive movies. But it was going to have a lot of gruesome makeup effects and, more of what we think of a 1980s horror film being. And when they started to pitch it, the producers just was like, this is not horror film. What are you talking about? We need like with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And they said, well, they're dead. So there's like, well, go find
so we'll give you the next best thing.
So that's, and what they wanted to do was the old dark house. And I think, so here's what I would say. Looking at this movie, objectively with a critical eye, I do think it's fun. I have a good time watching this, but I think it's like a 2.5 star movie out of 5. However, if you like vintage horror, or if you like any one of these actors, or all of them, because if you like one of these guys, you probably like the others. That's usually, but if you like that kind of thing, you might kick it up, one more star, even though it's got a really a really hokey ending. Although again, the ending is very much like Mark of the Vampire. Or one of the kind of movies that they were emulating. So it is a pastiche of that kind of movie. It does accomplish that goal, but I could see if you were going, oh, this movie's from 1983, you'd probably be expecting something more like a Friday the 13th movie or The Howling or something, and this isn't that. However, what it does have is a really awesome VHS cover. So if you can find anything with the video art and put yourself in the mindset of a young horror fan growing up in the 80s, passing that by in the video store, you will understand why I had to own this movie when I was a kid.
Beautiful.
It's good to be back.
That was a great opening. I really appreciate it. We should probably bob back and forth. So, Mary, I'm going to pick on you first from our guest, the Monster Movie Happy Hour. Second only to Drew, I can imagine, you seem to be probably the greatest enthusiast of the cast of this movie. So I'm just dying to know what you thought.
So this is the first viewing of this film for me, but a movie that I saw again for the first time recently, and I can't believe it took me this long to watch it, was The Monster Club, which features Vincent Price in 1981, and I feel like House of the Long Shadows is in the same sort of realm as The Monster Club, where it is a very self-referential creation that was essentially designed for these 4 actors, Carradine, Price, Lee, and Cushing. And that's, I think, the most exciting thing about this movie is that each entrance is so has such panache, and this was really a movie for them to shine. And I was texting Dave and Scott as I was watching it for the first time, and like Vincent Price's entrance is wonderful, and Christopher Lee, they light him just like they do in the Hammer horror movies. Yeah. There's a lot of like contemporary references going on. And again, spoilers ahead. At the very end, when you see that it's all sort of not real, the conversations between the actors who are essentially actors in the movie. I just thought it was delightful. I thought it was so funny and so it's such a tribute to their sort of collective body of work, where it was meant to be fun and meant to be lighthearted and meant to be a little bit silly. And I agree with Drew. The ending didn't really land for me. But everything else I thought was awesome. And I think this is Christopher Lee acted his heart out. I think that's one of the things I like so much about him in particular. I don't know. I like all of them. But he's so sincere in every role that he embodies. And I think that really makes the movie. You see the same sort of thing with Vincent Price and Peter Cushing and John Carradine. They really put all of themselves into a role regardless of the artistic merit of the film. And I think that they really gave a lot of, they did a lot of credit to the genre. So I loved it. I thought it was so much fun.
That is really cool. Thank you so much, Tony. Have you seen this film before? Obviously this is kind of our era, right? So I don't know. Have you come across it?
I had not seen it, and I think cast is what really makes the film. The film itself, I think in some ways, if it didn't have the cast it had, it would not be as memorable. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like the setup, and I don't think the film is bad per se, but how it flows and what all's going on is definitely helped by this cast, which is just so amazing to see all of your favorites, like all of your fan favorites in one movie is amazing. And that really just watching them play off of each other, like everything about that is amazing. But I think if you took that out, and again, that makes a different movie. So I think, I don't want to be disingenuous, but I really do think that is why you would want to watch this movie. Without that, it's still a fun movie, and it would be a fun, like, again, I've talked a lot about, hey, I'm going to switch on this movie, and late night, oh, this is cool, but the staying power comes from the cast. For sure. And
I would definitely go see this at the theater, right? I mean, wouldn't you go watch this like at the Alamo if it were playing?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I interrupted you, Tony. I'm so sorry.
Oh, good. I mean, that's basically like I had fun, but I think it's really this ensemble fan favorite cast that makes it so special.
Back to the other side. Scott, I mean, I just to project, I mean, I probably may have liked the film more than roughly half of us, but I don't know if you're a big fan. I mean, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, my generally speaking, I'm on board with everything that previously has been said, in that it's great to see a film with the 4 horror icons in it and to see them play and the repartee between them. But again, if it wasn't for them, this movie, I think, is maybe fair. It's very stagey from my perspective, and given the source material, and again, it's that sort of drawing room thing, but it's out of date. It does not seem like a contemporary film from 1980s. It seems like something from the 1930s. Mm-hmm. Aside from some of the special effects, as minimal as they are, I thought I think maybe I'm the only one here, but to me, the music for this film was dreadful. I thought it was terrible. It just seemed it seemed lazy. It just seemed
I don't remember it that well, so I can't.
Okay, well, good for you. Good for you. I mean, it just seemed there was a couple scenes where, like, when the writer character, Desi Arnaz Jr., is driving from town to the mansion. There's some music playing, and I was listening to it and going, this music does not go with this scene. It's incongruent, and I just thought it added to my dissatisfaction with the film. And the only other complaint I would have about it is, I don't know enough about the history of this and the background of this, but Desi Arnaz Jr. is an adequate actor, and I want to put the emphasis on adequate.
That was actually written on the back of his headshot. I'm sure it was. It's one of those movies where you could have taken any middle of the road television actor from the era and put him into that role, and it would have been just the same film. Mm-hmm. He has little to no charisma, and maybe it's just because I was inclined, because even having not seen this, when I knew that Desi Arnaz Jr. was this sort of the protagonist, I was like, really? So maybe I was inclined negatively to begin with, but I think the movie would have been better if there had been somebody of a little bit bigger stature. I don't know who. I don't have anybody in mind, but I couldn't. He's not somebody. Imagine. It's a good question. Yeah.
It's like I just can't take him seriously. Well, for example. And of course he's much older at this time, and I'm just pulling this name out of my hat right now because it occurs to me. But imagine somebody like Gene Barry, or somebody like a younger person, probably about Arnaz's age, and this is really obscure, but somebody like Bradford Dillman. Well, there you go. If you don't know that name, that to me is an indictment of Desi Arnaz Jr. because it's like, really? I've never heard of this guy. It's like whoever it is could be in this position. I don't know. So
yes.
So but that said, Mary, as she mentioned earlier, she'd been texting with us about the film as she was watching it and texting her enthusiasm. Yep. And I agree. I mean, the four leads have charisma, obviously, and they're the draw, obviously. And she mentioned a movie that she hasn't seen, but I've seen before with three of the four, called Scream and Scream Again. And I only bring this up because that movie is interesting, again, only because of those leads. Because if you try to follow that film, it's completely disjointed and makes no sense at all, or very little sense.
I kind of think that so many of these films exist purely because of Lee, Cushing, and Price, where I think someone was like, we got to get them together. It's like, we'll put them in anything.
Well, and again, obviously that's not, the show is not about that film, but it's one of those films that it's like, I wouldn't watch it. It would just be disjointed if it wasn't for those stars, because they're good even when they're working with subpar material, and this movie that we're discussing, I think, would have been much better if it had been a better script, as good as they are.
No, I think it's fantastic. Okay, Julia, I mean, I feel certain that you probably haven't. Are you certain that I haven't made you watch this movie in the past? I definitely had seen it before and had literally forgotten.
It wasn't an early date movie, Jason.
Right.
I don't think I've seen it before. So I enjoyed watching this movie with Jason because it's an amusing experience. Because anytime a movie is about a writer, it's always like, Jason's like, it's him. He's in it. So I actually wrote down the quote. He said, when the guy first said, I want to go write for 24 hours in a place that hasn't been lived in for 40 years and has no probably power, probably no water, probably basically Drew's whole situation for last week. Jason goes, wow, this is a dream. And then that's the first quote. The second quote is the guy walks in, you're looking at this set, you're looking around, it's pretty gorgeous set. And Jason goes,
I wonder what kind of typewriter he has. And he's like, oh, I know what it is. I was just laughing. I'm like, oh my God, you can't watch this film as a film. You have to watch it as like a personal experience of this. It's just him. So that was amusing. I was expecting Desi Arnaz Jr. to be awful. He was actually not bad. Like you said, he was adequate. He's perfectly fine. It was not.
He's adequate.
Yeah, he was not a distraction to me. I really, of course, enjoyed. I really loved that all of Peter Cushing's lines are punctuated by thunder. That just cracked me up. He would just say something and then there would be thunder, or he would like say something, pause for thunder, and then continue the sentence. Yeah. That was fantastic. Christopher Lee was hot in this movie. I was like, my God, he looks pretty sexy. I don't know. I liked him.
And tell me twice.
Yeah. And so I thought that was all great. Yes, the ending was so predictable. I said to Jason at the beginning, I'm like, okay, it's either going to be that the producer guy paid all these people to just mess with him, or it's all his novel and we're just seeing the novel. And it was both. I was like, all right, cool. But yeah, no, it's so, it's silly. It's really silly. It's really silly. The romance with him and that blonde chick is so dumb. There was just certain things, but yes, it's such a pleasure to see, those four together in this film, and like I said, I think the sets were worth noting. I think they're really attractive.
Well, apparently it's actually a manor house, and I apologize.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So mixed bag for sure.
Wonderful. David, what about you?
Well, just like everybody else has more or less said, I was happy to see these four icons gathered in one place, for this one movie, and I just wish it was a better movie. I found myself thinking, what would it have been like if somebody had pitched and pulled off an anthology with these four, with each one having their own segment, but the wraparound story would be these four men sitting in front of a fireplace sipping scotch.
You mean like Vault of Horror, where they get off the elevator
exactly.
and tell stories?
Or kind of like the Chowder Society from Ghost Story, trying to one up each other. I could almost see that happening maybe in the 70s. When Amicus was still doing these anthologies. But at any rate, Desi Arnaz Jr. What can I say? I mean, he wasn't bad. He tried. I kind of feel sorry for the guy. When you grow up with two powerhouse parents, you've got no chance in hell of getting out of that.
Who are his parents?
His parents are Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Oh,
and so, I think he really tried. I feel like the poor guy was maybe in over his head, but that in itself made me kind of want to root for him a little bit as an actor, even in this movie, because who among us haven't felt inadequate in the things that we do, even the things that we choose to do. I cannot tell you how many times I've had anxiety dreams where I'm suddenly on stage and I've got to perform a play or something like that. I'm not an actor, right? Or I'm on a movie set, and I promise I'm thinking, did he kind of feel like that every single time?
Yeah.
And then I found myself thinking, what if they had used in 1983 somebody like Michael Keaton, who had just
Mr. Go ahead.
Right? Or better yet, here's one. Why not use a Scottish actor like Tom Conti? Because these are people who.
Or Peter Capaldi. Who would have been
exactly.
about the right age.
Yes.
Yeah. Peter Capaldi as in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But he was like, Lair of the White Worm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
he was fabulous in that.
I feel like, honestly, the addition of, the replacement of poor Desi Arnaz Jr. with like either one of those two would have ramped the movie up a little bit higher, because I think you would have had somebody who very innately would have had a better sense of comic timing and had a better idea of what to do with the role. Nevertheless, I enjoyed parts of the movie. I truly did. I watched it with my wife, and we really had a good time.
Yeah.
And I thought the atmosphere was really pretty solid. The supporting cast, much of it pretty effective. And admittedly, the ending is, fairly lame, but part of me found it just a little bit sweet, particularly like the last part of the ending. Like the scene where it's revealed that he's just there meeting with his
in this case it's his publisher,
and meeting the woman for the first time, right?
I thought you were going to say the part where Vincent Price calls Christopher Lee a bitch, but
that's in the Great Party.
I had to rewind because I was like, did I hear?
I know, that's actually pretty good. Oh, no kidding. Oh, and then something else that kind of caught me by surprise, because not much happens for a significant part of the movie. And then suddenly, let's see, I've got it written down here, the name of the character's name, I believe, is the actress's name is Louise English. It's Diana Calder. She, she's up in her room and she's splashing water on her face, and then you hear the shriek, and the next time you see it's like, oh crap. And I actually thought that was a pretty effective and somewhat shocking effect of that, the acid that's burned away half of her face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there was like steam or smoke or something rising. So that actually caught me off guard, and I thought, hey, good on you. So those are my overall impressions from the movie, though.
Wonderful. I'll make my thoughts real short, but what I like about this movie is it feels very sketch-like. Like this could have been a TV special where you're just finding an excuse to have all these people make an entrance and do some stuff. You're just doing your best to get them all together. What I like about this movie, curiously, I like the movie better knowing that it exists aside some other movies that would be good, like to compare and contrast. Because I love movies about writers who take bets to stay overnight in places. That's a whole subgenre. I love movies where where it appears to be essentially almost a bottle episode, where it looks like you're adapting a stage play, which in many ways this is. So all of the negatives about the film, to some extent, are also to what makes me kind of charmed by it. But it does drag. We should probably go straight into it, but I do want to say the ending. I actually really dig the ending because I like this. I've seen this ending 1,000 times, and I enjoy it every time they do it. Because you know what, I shouldn't spoil other movies. That wouldn't be fair. Like we're spoiling this movie, but there's other movies that do this gag, and I sort of enjoy that. So I won't say which ones also. The same. But okay, so the movie begins. And movies about writers. Period. I really like movies about writers because as a guy who fancies himself a writer myself, I love seeing the way that writers' lives are presented in the movies because it is so much cooler than actual writers' lives. With rare multimillionaire exceptions. The way that these guys live is just way cooler. So yeah, Desi Arnaz Jr., who I, by the way, grew up with watching in reruns where he played a teenage version of himself.
Sure.
He had a sitcom. He had a sitcom, and Lucy was his mom, and Lucy Jr. was his sister, and it was just Lucy as a dingbat working for I don't know,
Mr. Mooney.
Yeah, right. In one version, another is her brother. Anyway, it was Gail.
Gail Gordon.
Gail Gordon, very good. Yes. Okay, so Lucy worked for Gail Gordon, and she had the two swinging teenagers in the 60s, and Lucy Jr. wearing her miniskirts, and Desi Arnaz Jr. playing his bongo drums, and it was a silly, awful show, and I'm sure that it was pre-sold, and poor Desi Arnaz Jr. was probably forced to do it by his parents. And because even after those people got divorced, they still ruled Desilu Productions with an iron fist. And I'm sure that Desi Arnaz Jr. was never quite free of that. But that was where I knew him from, as this teenage comedy star, right? So he's fine. Anyway, the Desi Arnaz Jr. plays a famous writer who has landed in London, and his publisher is tooling around in a nice car, taking him to signings. All of this is awesome. This is the kind of shit that made me want to be a writer when I watched it as a kid. And let's see, it very quickly, Julia, I'm going to pick on you. Explain to us the plot that we just saw in another movie that happens in this movie too. What happens when they go to lunch?
Wait, what movie? What are you talking
about?
What
happens in this movie? But it's exactly what happened in Castle of Terror.
Castle of Terror, right. Yeah, no. So
it's basically what happened. I mean, not quite, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just this idea that he's gonna make. He says, "I can write a book in 24 hours," and then he's like, let's make it, a friendly wager." And he says, I'll write a book in 24 hours for $10,000. No, make that $20,000 or whatever they're using, pounds, I guess. And so he says, but I need to go dollars. Yeah. I need to go somewhere isolated. And the producer says, I have just the place. It's a house that's nobody's been in it for 40 years. No power. You have to go off in the middle of, which part is in Wales, right. In Wales, it's an unpronounceable name. He writes it down, and then he's like, so then he goes out there and finds a train station to get directions, and the guy's like, but you don't want to go there. Nobody ever goes there. But yeah, it's that whole idea that I can write you a book in 24 hours. And Jason's like, that sounds like a great challenge. I want to do that. I'm like,
so first of all, I totally wanted to do this, but guys, I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts. I love, and I know that people say that I'm Monty Hall, and I just basically love everything we watch, right?
Who says you're Monty Hall?
I've never called you Monty Hall.
Never called you Monty Hall. Apparently, you've decided.
No, I'm not saying that you guys. I'm just saying that Monty Hall was a reach. I'm trying to decide whether I want to. No, I don't. Forget it.
It's too late now.
You're leaving us hanging, Jason. You can't just
back in the
us.
80s. I had a lot of friends who did who did a lot of role-playing games, and they said that there was a certain kind of dungeon master that they called Monty Hall. Monty Hall was somebody who things would always work out for you. There were always prizes behind every door, and had a generally good attitude. And that truly, when I typically, with rare exceptions, I tend to be super forgiving. So my point is, I'm just apologizing, I think, for my general positivity about this movie. Because I know that this is not...
I'm the one that recommended this movie. I like this movie. Mary likes this movie. We are not apologizing. Why are you?
Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I love this first act where he leaves London and he drives into the middle of BFE, right? And it's something I've seen in a lot of these weirdly British movies that seem aware that to the international market, once you get out of London, you're in there's just nothing out there but trees and lightning.
Well, he's supposed to be in Wales,
folk horror land.
So
Wales is apparently, right next door to London.
Right. It's presumably a long drive, and he's just going in the middle of nowhere. And it actually also makes me wonder. I mean, he's essentially going off the map. The Baldpate in Wales here may as well be just a non-place. That's just that he's just driven out into the middle of nowhere, which is very much like Mary mentioned the Monster Club. There's the thing where the guy heads out of London and he finds himself in a spooky little town.
Yep.
That nobody can ever find. I love that concept. It's very magical. This idea that you drive and somehow you move through this transom into a world that's right next to our own, but not recognizable. I mean, that was.
Well, it's funny too when they start in. Something I was reminded of. We were at a wedding, and it's the first time I encountered this because there's the part where he's like, "Hey, is this the right name?" And the Welsh guy is, "Oh no, that's not it." But we were sitting at this table, and I was talking to this couple. I think they lived in London or thereabouts, and I said, "Oh yeah, well, we haven't been able to go to the UK, but my parents go to Scotland, and they've also visited Wales." And this guy goes, "Oh yeah, something, but they're Welsh." And he had this really and that was the first time I encountered this kind of that there was this schism. I didn't, I don't live there in the UK, and I've never encountered that. I had to ask another friend of mine, what's the deal with this? Why is this? And it's a long, there's a long history of this, but that was the first time. So seeing the kind of opposite of British.
Yeah.
Wow.
But because we kind of, being Americans and often kind of glossing over stuff, we tend to lump the UK all kind of together, and but when you see it, it's definitely a thing. So seeing the opposite of that, that's not right, jerk, was just oh yeah, I remember that. But it brought up this yes, but they're Welsh, and this just dripping with seething ugh.
Oh no!
Like, it was cool to see. It was kind of interesting to see the opposite of that in this movie.
Yeah, they're
especially from this guy who's
right?
like, "Hey, I'm an American guy, just being cool. Here's this.
Oh, good.
Here's this. This thing I'm mispronouncing, which can happen. If you look at Welsh like street signs and stuff, how any of us are supposed to know what that is.
Right. Yeah,
I had another friend who had a job. He wasn't supposed to be working, but he got a job phoning people in Wales and asking them about addresses and stuff.
Oh,
and
no!
He just had to make all of these. He's American, so he had to make these same, like, seeing this guy having it written down brought back that kind of funny story as well, because he's calling people, and obviously, like, when you hear somebody on the phone and they don't know what, like, why are you calling me, right? Like, there's no way some American goes, do you live at that? Like, what can you do? So seeing this guy struggle with that was also pretty amusing.
Yes. Because it's unpronounceable. I mean, it's unpronounceable unless you're Welsh. I mean, it's this.
I mean,
it's just a bunch of consonants with an R.
Doesn't Welsh look like it was actually devised by Lovecraft for his his mythos?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, it's cool when you hear it, and like it sounds awesome. But being an American and looking at it and trying to sound out, Gaelic is just again, like, it is kind of like that, It's this poor guy, bald pate, and you see it and you're like, oh, and
the train master is not having it. He's like,
no, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, understandably so. Like, how often does that probably happen?
Yeah.
Just people coming in and just murdering the language.
It reminded me of Scott when people try to convince him that possums are friendly.
Well, to me, this whole thing, I mean, I feel like this film engages with a lot of tropes, like sort of the old dark house trope, the brother who's the murderer trope. But the other bit is the outsiders trope, where it's like, you don't belong here sort of deal, where they, like in Wrong Turn, or in, one of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, where they stop at a gas station and they're like, turn back now sort of thing. I feel like that was...
Well, Friday the 13th has Crazy Ralph.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what's beautiful about this act, is he stops at the train station, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, but I interrupted you. Please continue.
That's about as much as I wanted to say. I think it's really fun when there are all those little
it wears its tropes proudly, right? I also wanted to go back for just a moment and mention about Desi Arnaz's character. Just the weird, because it's a 1983 film. I mean, all of this is just I love that first act as they move into the second act. The very first act, when they're at dinner and they have the bet, some of the dialogue is just profoundly silly. Like we know that Desi Arnaz Jr. is supposed to be the author of these sort of, I don't know, I guess they're like Gay Talese kind of books, like Thy Brother's Wife and stuff that's getting written about and is like having something to say about American society and all this stuff. But Arnaz has to speak all these lines that even he doesn't seem to be convinced by, about how he's, I don't believe in all those old-fashioned ideas about love and blah, blah,
he was directed to act in a very particular way, like going back into the tropiness of this movie. They basically told him that you are the just play this like the typical leading man from like a 1930s movie. And that's really what make the wisecracks where they are in the script, and that's about it. They basically told him not to think too deeply about this character. And when we talk about his performance, which I'm honestly, up until this time watching it, I never gave it him in this movie much thought at all, other than the fact like, there's Lucy from I Love Lucy's kid. But
he's not bad in it.
No. He was doing what was asked too.
Well, it's the David Manners character, right?
Exactly.
He's just the idiot.
It's David Manners.
Yeah, he's like in the Mummy. He's the one that you definitely didn't pay your ticket to come see this guy. He's just He's just the guy who's standing in for you and is going to get you to Boris Karloff. You know,
I want to believe that there were at least a few people in 1983 who were paying to see Desi Arnaz Jr.
It probably was a very robust Desi Arnaz fan club.
Yeah,
it probably was.
He's still fifth build though behind John Carradine, you know, who is a very old, you know, like all four of these guys are mature.
Yes,
but John Carradine is very old in this movie.
He's seasoned,
wizened, and Dracula's here, right? There's like, so that means Carradine played Dracula. Lee played Dracula.
Yeah.
Cushing, to my knowledge, never had any reason ever to play Dracula, but
I don't know.
He never did.
Did Price ever have any cause to play Dracula?
He
never played Dracula, but he did play a vampire.
Because he played in the Monster Club.
Yeah,
and
that's true. Yeah,
and F Troop. He played a vampire on an episode.
No way!
All right.
I think they were trying to overdo. They said, okay, Bela Lugosi is dead. The producers want Bela Lugosi, but you know, we can't give them Bela Lugosi, so we're just gonna give them as much Dracula energy as we can.
Big Dracula energy.
He was such an unusual Dracula, by the way. Carradine was. I mean, he
yes.
Well, let's be honest. Carradine, kind of an unusual guy and an unusual performer. He's always watchable, but wow,
his voice was always odd, even when he was young.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes,
He's
got a very
like
distinctive voice.
Description of Dracula. Though.
He does kind of, doesn't he? Yeah.
With like the mustache and the bushy hair and everything, you know, Lugosi was always a little bit too put together to really be Stoker's count, and you know, Lee, but you know, like none of, you know, like I would like to meet the person that John Carradine is their favorite Dracula. I've yet to meet them, you know, but he played Dracula enough, and he's. You know, surely somewhere is like, that's my guy.
Okay, so I think on Twitter we need to start asking people that very question, because I actually be curious to hear that.
I have to say that, you know, as long as we've opened this doorway,
oh dear,
I think that John Carradine is probably a superior Dracula to Lon Chaney Jr., who also played Dracula.
That's true.
I will fight you on that.
I want to see this. I want to see this.
Lon Chaney Jr. gets a bad rap, but he's basically the Jack Palance Dracula decades earlier, and people love Jack Palance.
I did not care for Jack Palance. When I watched that one, I was like the sets are nice, but like no one holds a candle except for maybe Klaus Bang in the BBC Dracula.
Oh no! See, now I have to disagree. I actually think that Jack Palance exuded what I imagine Stoker's written Dracula
emotionally
would feel like. Slightly animalistic, but you know.
Yeah,
we've opened a whole Dracula doorway.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jason. We totally killed this episode.
But Tony had the best take on Palance. I really enjoyed Tony's theory, which was, well, I mean,
that's
Tony,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, basically that he was pissed off Dracula, essentially.
I just want to see.
He just rips. Scott, I mean, he used up the scenery like crazy, and but he just rips through stuff. Like his presence. What I like about Palance is his presence. As far as Carradine goes, I just watched all three kind of Monster Mash movies. Mash movies. And I will say that I like aspects of his Dracula, but he always seems like a little disheveled in some ways, and like it doesn't have that. He doesn't have the same gravity.
Oh no, I agree with that.
Others have, and I think he's doing a good job. Like this is not a knock against like his acting as Dracula as a vampire. He's interesting on screen, but there's not that same weight.
I agree.
But
I agree.
You see him in other roles, and he has that. So it's it's interesting to see that. I think.
I think you know what's interesting about looking at Lon Chaney Jr. and John Carradine as Dracula. What's interesting is it's probably a credit to both of them as actors. Actually, neither one of them tried to do Lugosi.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm sure there probably was some pressure to play it like Lugosi, because
considering how it's not very long after Dracula.
Yeah, but
it's 15 years, but that's nothing really.
Right. In the public's imagination, it's Lugosi, right? That's who they imagine Dracula is. Yeah.
And you had Lugosi playing a vampire and other things, but and look, we stumped for Lugosi in this house. We no disrespect to the Draculas that are in this movie, but this is a Lugosi house.
You need a sign out front.
Yeah, I love it.
So we meet some of the characters when in this act where he drives through the storm, he stops at the train station. Now remember, knowing what we know about the end, that this is all our writer coming up with stuff. He's writing this already, really, because he's inventing the people at the train station. And so it's Desi Arnaz Jr., the novelist, who has walked in and said, there's a young couple over there, and I can tell by the first bits of their dialogue that they're not very happy. There's an asshole, behind the ticket counter, and there's a crazy lady who I don't even remember if that does pay off. Yes. All of this stuff is happening. Because otherwise, why stop at the train station? It's just to lay some of this and set up some of these characters so that they can
And if it weren't for the crazy lady, for the old lady in disguise, I would wonder if he didn't actually just go by the train station and then use these people for the novel. But there's no reason. But there's no reason for an old lady in disguise to go in the bathroom and climb out a window. Like, that's crazy. So clearly that is part
maybe
of
in your household.
Story. Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe he's just like a lot of us writers, and he's daydreaming. Because he did see the girl when they were at the restaurant at the earlier.
Right.
So maybe, I'm a writer, like a lot of the other people on this color writer. And I can tell you, like, if I see something, a person that looks interesting to me, or, an element of something that seems atmospheric, I might start writing a story in my head then and there, and I can't be that different from everybody else who dabbles in the literary arts.
Right, and on top of that, her name's Mary. The character's name's Mary. The secretary. He writes her as the secretary, and then meets her in person, and then is shocked to find out that she's actually his secretary.
At the end, yes.
Yeah. Although I would say, if someone ever came up to me and said, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" I would probably say no. Nope. See you later.
Okay, now Mary, I'm going to challenge you. What
like,
if somebody
this is, I do,
Christopher
but
Lee?
This is not it.
I was gonna say, if it was Christopher Lee, it would be a different story.
All
if
right.
it was Christopher Lee, it's like, it's not love at first sight. I've just been waiting.
That's right. There we go.
Wow. I mean, well, we'll get to that part at the end, but who knows why she's interested in being macked on by Desi Arnaz Jr. I mean, he's a super famous writer.
That's right.
Maybe whatever. There's no.
I mean, in the context of things, he's like a famous writer. He's, there being hip and cool. He's always got this, like, he's trying to portray this like machismo kind of, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey,
so
I'll be back for you later.
I think it's funny though. I think it's funny though that he's a famous writer, and then within the context of his novel, he says to one of the characters, "I'm a writer," and the character says, "Are you famous?" And he goes, "Well, if I was, I guess you would have heard of me, so maybe not." But then that's also presumably within the book a guy that was paid by the publisher to say that, to like pretend he was no good. The whole thing it makes my head hurt.
He's no Sutter Kane. That's all I can say. He is no Sutter Kane.
Yes, it's a really good point. See, there's another one. That's another example.
I couldn't help. Sorry.
We do get to see, just like with Sutter Kane, we do see one of his book covers, which is
yes,
it's a lunacy. I mean, the cover is called
so weird. It's the way I actually had to pause and go back, and then I had to look it up on the internet because I wanted to look at it closer, because it's like this super weird Statue of Liberty with like one giant boob hanging out and not, like, no other boob. Like, she only has the one giant boob, and then like the face is kind of skeletal, and it's just weird. It's such a weird cover.
And while I remember the illustration, what was the title of the book? Do you remember?
The Lie.
Oh, that's all it was. Okay.
It's so sort of early '80s hip. It's this it's this big post Nixon, but like filtered through 1,000 filters so that now it's just like this knee-jerk, these are the kind of, if you go back to any like TV series at that time, they're all making jokes. And look, I got nothing against cynicism, but this is just like cheapness. This is just like, it's like Mary said, it's a trope. It's just off the shelf.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a cynical writer.
Yeah.
There's a Statue of Liberty. She's half naked and fascinating stuff. And she's surrounded by either stars or little fighter planes. We honestly couldn't tell like which they were. Yes. So anyway, he gets to the old dark house and immediately starts kind of looking around a little bit, just like in Web of the Spider or Castle of Terror, but really is looking for a place to stop. And he very quickly, finds a bedroom, puts his little, very awesome portable typewriter that's in his very and he has a briefcase, I presume, full of paper because, and the thing is, I actually could not imagine for the life of sitting down and thinking, holy shit, what's my first line? I've got to write a book in 24 hours. What is my first line? Like, what the hell am I going to...
He's had a very long drive to think about it.
That's true.
I don't know that it's necessarily being written. He's just typing it. I think he's probably already plotted it out.
I hope so. And, and now it's about this point, so I'm going to mix up some of the plot here, and it doesn't even matter because we really got to get to the cast drawing. But anyway, he very quickly figures out this house is not as deserted as it seems because people have cleaned it. There's fresh linens, all of which makes sense. Maybe if your publisher said, "Hey, somebody's going to come stay at your place, so can you get somebody to go out there and at least clean up a bedroom?" That kind of makes sense. But the first people he runs into, would one of the Monster Movie Happy Hour guys like to tell us about the first two people, which is John Carradine and the inimitable Sheila Keith?
Who, by the way, was supposed to be Elsa Lancaster, but she was Lancaster, but she was too sick.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, that would have been
Lancaster.
amazing.
I had it right the first time, Lancaster. Yeah.
Wow.
Although
Yes.
Sheila Keith is very good in this, and I think doesn't, because of the fame of her co-stars, doesn't quite get as much credit when people talk about this movie for...
Okay, I was not aware of her until recently. Who here, and there's no shame in it, like I say, I only discovered this woman recently, but did anybody else encountered Sheila Keith in other movies? Like, is this an actress you've come across?
Her face looked familiar, but that was about it. So I had to look her up as well.
I only know her from another movie called The Comeback. The Comeback is from just a couple years before this. Now, dig this. The Comeback is about an American composer who comes to London to sign some checks and be a kind of a near has-been rock star. And his publisher says, "Hey, go stay in my mansion so that you can work." I am not
Wow.
making that. And Sheila freaking Keith.
This
in the
director, mansion. Pete Walker, the guy that directed this, used her quite frequently.
That was Pete Walker. It was the same director.
No way.
Yeah. That's funny. He's that's one hell of a specific typecast.
Yes.
Maybe this is all the director ever made. I mean, he made movies. He made 15 movies, all built on the same concept. We should.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like y'all definitely
his other movies are much more racy than this. Because
really?
they were trying to do an older style, that sort of 1930s, 1940s style. This movie's, it's got a little bit of gore, but not much. So
the Comeback feels much more like a giallo picture because there's more deaths and it spends more time with some people getting killed in London before they get there. But basically, you got to see The Comeback. It makes a good sort of bookend.
Yeah. You've convinced me. So I don't know. I mean, you just asked if one of us would address it. Well, essentially, you have the appearance, quite unexpected, of John Carradine as the.
Well, they say that they're the caretaker.
The caretaker, thank you, the caretaker. The caretaker and presumably his wife, or the caretaker and her husband. And it's immediately obvious based upon their expressions and their demeanor that they are, in fact, more than just caretakers. And is it shortly thereafter that...
Very quickly after that. that the rest of the cast just start showing up.
Yeah, they just start piling in. It's like the dwarves knocking on, knocking on Bilbo's door.
That's what I want. That's the kind of grand adventure that I want. I want Vincent Price and Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee show up at my house. Yeah, and say we're going on an adventure, and I would say, sure, where? I'm in.
Yeah.
You're like, all we're missing is Christopher Lee. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, oh, thank goodness.
The rest of
exactly.
I wouldn't come if it wasn't for Christopher Lee.
I would buy into a talk show where they all visit that Hobbit set and just did a round table, like, now we couldn't do it, but during this time I would watch a show where they just sat in comfy chairs.
Yes.
This cast sat in comfy chairs and got interviewed. That would be amazing.
Oh God, yes.
I just kept going back to the fact that at no point he says it a couple times, but I kept being compelled by, especially with Jason going out to the farm and being a writer and stuff. At what point does he go, I just came here to work.
Yeah.
Like none of you are letting me work.
But that's why it becomes pretty obvious that it is in fact the novel, because at first he says that the $10,000 or $20,000 is more important than basically his life. But then he pretty quickly goes, "Oh no, it's actually pretty interesting. I'm done. I'm not going to write." And I'm like, no, knowing what I know about obsessive writers, this guy is not going to just go, never mind, I don't need to get the work done.
You know what, though? Eventually you get this many people in that by the time that, Christopher Lee shows up, you would be like, what the hell is going on?
Well, And by this time, your creative muse has essentially slipped out the window and is not coming back. Might as well just lean into it and have the punch and hang out with everybody.
Although I say that the publisher cheated because,
absolutely,
although I guess he didn't, because it's all fake.
That's
all fake. Yeah.
Theories start blowing it off, knowing that this is obviously a scam. I'm not going to be able to finish this book because obviously there's this conspiracy going on. But you're right. Pretty quickly he gets so really quickly. The people that are showing up. There's this girl who is her name is Mary, and she is very quickly revealed to be somebody who has been sent to distract him from writing his book. So now he knows his publisher is up to something. So now there's a girl. There's a love interest here, which is Julie Peasgood, who has the coolest accent.
Yes,
it is very cool.
Very distinctive.
It's neat to hear her speak, and it's different from everybody else. And I know jack all about British accents, so I couldn't place her accent to save my own life. But and then so Sheila Keith and John Carradine are there, and now there's Julie Peasgood, and now the heavy hitters start showing up because I think is it first Peter Cushing or first?
Yes. Peter Cushing.
Peter Cushing first, who and then very quickly following that, Vincent Price, and they are brothers, and we come to realize, this is a family reunion, and Dracula and Sheila Keith, are pretending that they're okay. They drop that. They are all really members of this family. They're having a reunion, and really the encroacher that they didn't expect is this stupid writer upstairs trying to write a book.
And the blonde chick.
And they invite these young people just sort of to hang out with them and drink sherry.
That's right.
Night before the houses.
So then what I love is
punch.
What I love is the punch, right? The drinking punch. Yes. What I love is that when Christopher Lee shows up, he pretends that he has not purchased the property. He is going to buy the property. Therefore, what are you people all doing here? And I'm like, we have bought several properties, and we have never been about to buy it, and therefore had the right to just walk into the house and kick other people out. I'm like, that is not how it works. You have to have already bought it before you can walk in. Anyway,
maybe you should try it sometime. It'd be real cool to see how that works out.
When he's looking at all the paintings, all these super modern, by the way, they were very 80s, the paintings. There are these paintings of each of the cast members, and he's realizing who they all are. They're all related to each other, including the caretakers. Then there's one empty one, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be Christopher Lee, even before Christopher Lee walks in. That's going to be Christopher Lee. So then when he walks in, he's like, oh, I'm about to buy the property. I'm like, no, you're obviously the brother. Oh, we need to talk about the brother, the 14-year-old that supposedly killed.
Yes.
That was
please go ahead and tell us what really is, in theory, the plot of the
plot.
film.
Yeah.
So, yes. So
we find out like halfway through or maybe more that there is a room upstairs that is locked. And at first they say that it's locked because their brother died and they just never then unlocked it. But then it turns out, no, actually he didn't die. Somehow during these 40 years, he's just been locked up in there, and the sister has been sliding him food because they believe that he murdered who? The mother?
A village girl.
Village girl.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He murdered somebody that he got pregnant and cut the baby out of her and everything. And so there's all this so supposedly he's just been up there the whole time, and nobody's ever gone in. And so these guys decide to go in, and the room is obviously not been lived in. Everything is covered in cobwebs. So I'm like, clearly the guy's not there. And so then I'm like, okay, so we know it's Christopher Lee. And Jason's like, well, wouldn't they recognize him? And then I was like, I don't know. It's all fiction.
Hasn't it been like 40 years since they'd been together?
Yeah, but
since 1939.
Theoretically, you would recognize your sibling.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Anyway,
I'm trying to imagine if I took my 14-year-old brother,
right,
and then 40 years went by, knowing what he looks like now in his 40s, would I recognize him?
As soon as he opens his mouth, you would for sure, because he talks the same. I mean,
obviously, Roderick had quite a bit of a growth spurt because he's Christopher Lee.
That's right.
6'7" or something.
Yeah.
And then somebody drops out of the ceiling.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Somebody drops out of the ceiling. What was the deal with that? Because I didn't get that.
It was a dummy. It was so the dude has been. They quickly work out that the brother who escaped long ago has also left traps. He leaves a dummy in this cupola in the room that's then is spring loaded to fall down, and it's just a stuffed dummy. That's although that was not clear to me at all because it wasn't
clear to me either.
No.
Well, okay, I have to, you know what? I'll be honest, folks. I fell asleep for a few minutes in the about 2/3 of the way in. What happened to the sister?
She is strangled to death with some piano wire.
That's much later in the movie, though.
Yeah,
I
she does.
totally
she turns up
missed
dead.
that.
I blinked and missed
you.
it too. I turned to Joy and I said, "Where'd the sister go?" And she goes, "Remember, they found her dead." And I was like, "No, I must have coughed and closed my eyes and missed the entire scene." I feel terrible, but yes.
It's kind of got a great line from Price about how it's like, oh, he must have heard her singing.
Her playing the piano.
Oh yeah, that was it.
Yeah. It is funny actually. Sheila Keith's singing is hilarious and great, and her blubbering on about her lost love, and it's wonderful stuff. All right, so Christopher Lee pretending to be this guy who's come to buy the mansion gets wrapped up in this sudden mystery of the missing brother that they intended to free tonight after 40 years, but he has clearly the brother has clearly begun to pick them off one by one, because we don't yet know who the culprit is. And so now it becomes kind of a more traditional horror movie because now people start to die. Dave, you were going to explain like how shocking this scene is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah! In 10 seconds, the bickering couple, they turn up too because they needed a place to get out of the rain. Okay, yes, go.
Well, no, that's literally it because I think I fell asleep again. But the bickering couple turns up, and then I think are they invited to have some of the punch as well? There's this punch, but at any rate,
it's a one big happy family at this point. Yeah,
right.
Anybody who shows up at the door,
they're soaking wet, and they go upstairs to change in the bedroom that the author has taken.
Right. And she's splashing water on her face.
Right. After another nasty argument, she is one of the deaths.
This is why movies with endings like this, because even though I also enjoy Mark of the Vampire, but it's got the same kind of, it's all a hoax or it's all an act kind of thing. But we are watching this, what we are later led to believe actress.
Yes.
Splashing this water on her face, and then it's like acid, and it like starts to melt away her flesh.
Though we don't see it, that actually happened for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but like she's method because like she's going through the motions of actually doing all this when you don't have to, and then you also see them fighting in private. Like you see them go off and fight in private.
That's totally in character. Totally in character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How funny.
refused to break.
No, I had the
whole
same
time.
thought that her face is melting off. We're not seeing her. Well, because we're not. Yeah, we see her screaming and stuff. But I guess, like you said, she's method. She's selling it.
That's right.
Pretty funny.
I
think the idea is that if anybody's listening, they'll hear her. Like,
Sure. Why not?
Do you think? Well, and also remember, it's a barrel within a barrel, because by the end, of course, it was all in his head anyway. Right. So, but do you think, jumping before we get to the rest of the murders, do you think the reason people don't necessarily remember the movie that well is they tend to severely discount films where the end is all a dream, like where none of it happened, like other films that I could spoil right now that I would mention, some that are named after holidays, where it turns out that everything was a hoax.
There may be something to that. Yeah, I think, quite frankly, if overall the movie had just been, quite frankly, that much better, we would be willing to overlook some of it. But
and I think they didn't spend a great deal of time with each of these murders, because in very quick succession we have surprise dummy, dad has a heart attack, daughter gets murdered by piano wire, bickering lady who was flirting with Christopher Lee, which I noticed.
She
gets splashed with acid, and then like a minute later, I think it's very close, and then her bickering husband drinks someone mixes
poison
or
some kind.
Yeah, it is
right.
Poison.
That's right.
And then right after that, the writer's like, "Oh, we gotta go. We gotta go." And Christopher Lee's like, "Go check the car." And all the tires have been slashed. So it's like, it's boom, 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 boom. And there's maybe one or two lines, like the one that Drew mentioned of Vincent Price making sort of a snide remark about the sister's piano playing. That makes it, I think, pretty forgettable, because it's so much at once.
Let me ask a question here.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Drew. No, go ahead, Drew.
The one thing that I wish there was more of in this movie is you have Vincent Price and Christopher Lee, who have two of the greatest speaking voices in horror cinema history.
Here.
And we don't get a full-on knockdown, drag-out shouting match between the two of them.
Although them talking at the very end, going back and forth, I was like, oh, that must have been so much fun. Yeah. Like, they must have had just a hell of a time on set. And when I was doing research for this, there are all these great pictures of them, like behind-the-scenes shots of Lee, Price, Carradine, and Cushing. They must have just had a ball with some of this.
Apparently not so much fun that John Carradine wasn't falling asleep during the dinner scene, apparently.
Oh, no.
Well, he was, in fairness to that, he was 80 years old when they
No, but they're all old. Like, it said in the IMDb that he was only 5 years older than Vincent Price, 7 years older than Peter Cushing, and 14 years older than Sheila Keith.
But look at how much healthier Vincent Price looks than John Carradine.
I think John Carradine lived a life of rather more of a life of excess. He enjoyed his drinks, and he enjoyed his cigars quite a bit. So I think.
Although that said, I assumed when I watched this, I was like, well, John Carradine must not have lived much longer, and I think he lived like 5 or 6 years beyond this film.
We're doing like another 30 movies in that time.
Yeah.
I know Lee is the youngest one of the bunch, but he also outlived all of these guys by he held in there.
Yeah. He died when he was like 91 or something, because it was in 2014, I believe.
Yeah,
sometime around that.
And he was still working. He was showing up and stuff. Like he was in that one Scorsese movie, like just a year before he died.
Yep.
What was it? Hugo. He was in Hugo.
I forgot about that. And then Jason, you mentioned, or did you just say 93?
He was 93 years old, yeah.
Oh, he was 93. Sorry, I think meant 1993. Because that's about when, I believe, I think Vincent Price and Peter Cushing both died within a few years of each other.
That's probably right. I've forgotten, but I suppose that's right. I remember, to this day, I am still shocked that when Peter Cushing died, he was not in the in memoriam sequence at the Academy Awards, which was shocking.
No way!
Well, we could go on and on about people that are missed in that sequence. that people don't get added to it. And I'm always like, why isn't, X in there? Why isn't Y in there?
Yeah. I guess you're right. There are. It was right. It was an oversight, but you're right. They just happened. So during this period, lots of deaths, and this actually it might be going a little fast, but it also is the point where the movie really picks up so quickly that it wraps up fairly quickly because it is not long before Christopher Lee reveals himself. He is the long lost brother. Yes. I mean, and the very phrase "long lost brother." That's the moment when you most feel like you're watching a stage play.
This is why Lee is so good in this movie, because there's the moment where he just changes from the Corrigan character to the Roderick character, and he says brother, and he takes on this certain tone. And then he puts an axe in his hand.
Yes.
He's so malevolent.
Yes.
He's quite menacing.
Hell yeah.
It's delightful. This is this movie. I think out of the many reasons why I enjoy it so much, I really think that Christopher Lee did a really good job. Yeah. I think it was perfect. It was terrifying. He, like Drew said, had that sort of switch, and you could see in Vincent Price's eyes, oh god,
oh yeah.
And it wasn't too over the top either. Which again, for actors who I think are known for being a little, or for really having some panache when it comes to their roles, I thought it was shockingly subtle.
Well, and what did you think of the shadow play death of Vincent Price's character? With all the screaming, it's oh my god, what happened? But he was really playing it up. And then when you get a chance to see the axe, it's holy shit, it's got brain matter and hair.
Right, it's all matted with hair.
The other thing that I love about the axe is that when he's going after the blonde girl, he turns it around to the clean end.
Because in the end,
they're hygienic in England.
He's a gentleman. He's being a gentleman.
Yeah. I saw the same thing. But you know what I love is when they're congratulating each other at the party, about the acting. It's oh, you got to fall down the stairs. And you have such you always do such great death scene. It's so cute. I thought that was really
cool. And the thing that Drew mentioned in the chats. I thought that last scene, I think that might be my favorite part, besides everyone's entrances, because I thought those were very grand. I had to go back and re-listen because it was Christopher Lee and Vincent Price were sort of needling each other, being a little passive aggressive. And Vincent Price just goes, "Bitch."
Yes. Wonderful. Because really we can skip right to that because it's at this moment when Desi Arnaz finally battles Christopher Lee, knocks him down the stairs. And now all the cast, just like in the end of that other movie that I don't want to spoil for people by naming, everybody comes out and reveals that their wounds are all fake. And including the person in that movie who got squished between two boats. Somehow, her wounds also fake.
Wow.
And
that's impressive.
Yes. Anyway, they and the publisher comes out, and it's all been a big, the bet's not going to happen. It's all been a big practical joke on Desi Arnaz, and they have a party. This damn party is a great excuse for this whole movie. The party, really, when you think about it, this movie paid for this party, and it probably, I'm glad it's on film because it's so cool to see them all drinking and talking, even in characters.
Wouldn't you love to have seen? I wish that sequence had been 10 minutes long.
Yeah,
just to watch the exchanges.
And one of the things that I wonder if this was deliberate. Sheila Keith and Peter Cushing were, chatting back and forth. They have a few lines, and she says something about his crying and his pathos, wasn't it, or something like that. And
she's delightful. I really like this woman. Yeah.
But he says he's sometimes they call me the I forget what it was.
The big drip.
The big drip. And I wonder if that was sort of a wink and a nod to the very well-known nickname that he had, not for crying, but for props. They called him Props Peter because he was always doing something. Yeah, and if you go back and look through Peter Cushing's performances, he was a master at using every little bit in each scene where he's either has an apple or a book or pours a drink or does all these sorts of things. He was doing a lot of his own stage direction.
That's really interesting.
Isn't that fascinating? And
That's great.
One of my favorites, you can really see it in Hound of the Baskervilles, where he is Sherlock Holmes and Christopher Lee is
Julia and I watched that recently, actually. Yeah.
I saw it. I watched it again a few months ago after, I think, maybe almost 20 years. And it was just as I remembered. And their scene chemistry is wonderful. But I wonder if that little, like, the big drip is sort of a wink for Peter.
Well,
for
it's
Peter
all
Cushing
patterned after you can tell it's patterned after these people's just character. Like, I knew, Julia and I both know this woman whose dad was like a major BBC producer. And they used to talk about how their parties were just full of these just sort of vivacious, very sort of outgoing actors. And the mom, Ruth, would say, every one of them has to make an entrance. They all come in, I'm here, scarves are being torn off and tossed, and wine is always being very dramatically held. And I mean, wouldn't you love to just be a fly on the wall and just like...
Oh, God, yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Without a
Like,
doubt.
here's Denham Elliott telling the same joke for the, 90th time. But you want
It makes me wonder if, like, Vincent Price, like, gosh, if they were just in a house, like, I imagine Vincent Price just, like, cooking elaborate meals for everybody.
Absolutely.
And everyone's just drinking and carousing and just having a grand old time.
And I think that there's echoes in this film of some of the earlier anthology films, and I can't recall who's in which ones, but there was a number of Corman films with Basil Rathbone and Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff and Vincent Price in a various milieu, and it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. That's one of those films where it's like when I watch those films from the mid to late '60s that are anthology with them, I in my mind's eye, I always wonder what the off-camera conversations were like and the repartee between these actors, simply because they had such long and fascinating careers and had such, especially to somebody who's interested in the genre, these different roles, and it would have been really interesting to have been a fly on the wall.
It's so interesting, and thank goodness Peter Cushing lived to a ripe old age, and that the BBC has wonderful interviewers. There's a lot, you can find a lot of, he has so many stories about exactly what you're talking about, Scott, of him talking to other people. And there's a great bit where he's talking about his relationship with Boris Karloff, who he was quite fast friends with, and how they both thought of Bela Lugosi. It's fascinating.
Can you share some of these links maybe on?
Yeah, I'll send these to you all.
Yeah.
You know what? Another thing
great.
that's interesting about Peter Cushing in this movie is that he thought he only had a year to live because when he filmed this, because his doctor, he had I forget what he had exactly, but his doctor had just basically told him, "Oh, you have another 6 months to a year to live." So I kind of wonder if that's one of the reasons why he's. So, I mean, obviously there's money, but if you think you're dying, then you might think, okay, well, why do I want to film yet another horror film? But maybe he thought, okay, I'm going to go hang out with my friends for a few weeks and it'll be fun. And of course, he lived quite a bit longer than this. But
almost 10 years,
But this is the last time that Lee and Cushing appear together in a horror film. And I think that's not unsignificant.
They did that. When did they do that? There's like a thriller, like a detective thriller that they did together, like a contemporary detective thriller where they're chasing killers.
I'm not aware of that.
But I can't remember if it's before this, same time, or after. But everything we're saying here makes this sound a lot like Ocean's 11, the original, because because they've talked about that where these guys didn't give a shit about this movie. It's you do your best because you're a professional, less the case on Ocean's 11 because Frank Sinatra was really not interested in filming like second takes or anything. But it was an excuse to get a big studio to pay for, to just make profitable a bunch of what they already would have done anyway, which is hanging out with Joey Bishop and Peter Lawford.
And I think that's one of my favorite things about just about their careers is their relationships, because they were all, especially Lee and Cushing, just had such a very dear friendship. They were best friends for their entire lives, or at least for the time since they've been working together, because their first bit was, or their first movie together was Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. And then Frank, and Christopher Lee had a bit role. And then they had, then they started with Hammer, and the rest is history. But they would even they would call each other up. And then again, I'll send you more of these links, but there's a wonderful interview that I think David, Scott, and I watched together that makes me cry because I think it's really sweet. But when Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing would go to the movies together, and they would watch cartoons, and they would go back and forth together and try and do the voices of the cartoons, and would laugh so much that they got kicked out of the theater once.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
And
that
then
great.
It's wonderful, and Christopher Lee would call Peter Cushing up and do the Tweety Bird and one of the dogs, and make Peter Cushing just laugh and laugh, and he did that up until he passed away. You would call him up and make him laugh with all these little voices. So, and that to me, I think just gives such a richness to watching this film, where Peter
Cushing does kind of seem like he's doing an Elmer Fudd impression in this movie.
Does he have trouble with his W's?
Yeah, there's a slight impediment.
L's or something, or R's or something. Yeah, he's got an impediment, right? A speech impediment. Yeah, that's a good point, Drew.
Which must be part of that illness, because in later films it's not there.
I think it was a deliberate character choice.
It's just a character.
I don't think that's.
I don't even think it was Peter Cushing doing the character. I think it was Peter Cushing's character doing that. In other words, I don't think he's doing it at the end during the party. I feel
that's right.
Okay. He isn't.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
By the way, the film I was thinking of is called Nothing But the Night. I think it's on Prime. Tony and I do nothing but watch whatever Prime tells us we should check out. And Nothing But the Night is a 1973 British horror movie with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. And they are, it has to do with investigating these serial murders and stuff.
Interesting.
So yeah, Peter Cushing enlists the aid of friend and police investigator Colonel Bingham and Christopher Lee, and they take on their investigation. So not a great film, but it's so fun to see them in a contemporary serial killer, and, in 1973. So it's 7 years before this. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Nothing But the Night, that was called. Yeah. So, all right. Very quickly after that party, we now have we've already had one pulling out of the image, and now we have a second one where it's revealed that all of this is taking place in Desi Arnaz Jr.'s mind, and he delivers a full manuscript back to his publisher the following day.
So first of all, everybody comes out and says, "Hey, we're actually all alive. None of that was true. It's all just the producer." Yeah. The producer comes out and he's like, "Yeah, it was all true." Then they have the party. Then we pull out and he's just typing at the house. So he actually is at the manor. And so I just want to point out that it's not just that he's sitting in a car thinking.
No, he really did it. Right. He really did the whole bit.
And everything is fine. Nothing creepy. I was sure something creepy was going to happen there at the end, but right before he left. But it
right, like you'd get bit by the gate.
Yeah, then he turns in right. And then he turns in the manuscript, gets the 20,000, and then tears up the check. What the hell was that about?
It's why he learned a lesson because money's not important. I was like,
that is what they say.
Stop.
I don't believe it. Learned the lesson, not the actor, not the guy, not the writer. Why did the writer?
But maybe he's so rich that 20 grand just doesn't matter.
Yeah, it could be that it was.
I think it is supposed to be that he learned a lesson through because he gives the whole spiel about, I really cared about the characters while I was writing this.
It's so dumb.
I'm not saying it's not hokey. I'm just saying that's
you're right. It is intended to be that.
I love that his character has got his feelings hurt by the blonde chick because she was pretending to like him, and he's like,
"Oh, right. I forgot about that."
But in the real world, she's really his secretary. And he,
secretary, I believe Desi Arnaz Jr. movie when he was hurt. That actually was good. That actually, he really looked like he was offended when she said, "Oh yeah."
Watching this movie does make me want to go watch Mark of the Vampire again, which is another movie like this where the end of the movie it's all bullshit. But if you watch it, it doesn't with any degree of scrutiny. It doesn't make any sense. And yet the experience of watching it is still enjoyable.
Sure.
Well, and as long as we're doing that, once again, then if that's the case, I'll advocate for another film that has Price Price and Lee and Cushing in it. This Scream and Scream Again. It's a film from 1970. It makes no sense. It has a vague plot line, but there's really a muddled resolution.
I've never seen it, Scott. I've never watched it.
And I mean, there's some good sequences, and they're all good in it. But the movie is like, what? You're constantly going like, what about X and what about Y? And it doesn't make any sense. So watch it and see if you have the same opinion.
That sounds fabulous. I mean, that's right up. Sadly, it's like, if this movie makes no sense and has Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, I'll watch that.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Vincent Price. I don't think I'm spoiling it for you. Vincent Price. After this plot, one of the plots of the movie is revealed, because he's also a synthetic human being. He lowers himself into a vat of acid. That's not the
wow.
And the rest. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, speaking of twists, there's one that we didn't address that may or may not be true.
Okay, go for it.
Vincent Price's character was the one who actually killed the girl.
Oh yeah, thrown in there along the way.
Yeah. I was like,
wow.
What? You want twists? I got twists.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
M. Night Shyamalan, eat your heart out.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And one of the problems, all that gets lost because, of course, you're very quickly dispensing with one reality after another.
Exactly. Yeah. They all sort of collapse, and so you're left with the writer meeting the actual secretary and saying, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" Is that correct?
Look at Mary's face.
I just watched. I watched Jason just collapse in his chair there for a moment.
Yes. But it's like Tony said, he's Desi Arnaz is he's kind of I don't even know. He's like, I guess he's the sexiest, most famous writer on the planet or something.
Sure, why not?
And like, and so the secretary's like, sure, I'll spend the weekend with you on your yacht or whatever it is that you do when you're in London.
Yeah.
And so
yachts on the Thames.
I don't know, what they're gonna do, but yeah.
And then you get a fight. You get a glimpse of the.
He's not. I'm saying he's not Sean Connery. Like Sean Connery would walk up to like the hat check girl and go,
"Yeah,
you believe in love at first sight?" She'd say, "Yeah." But this is Arnaz Jr.
Well,
this is like it's like Frank Stallone showed up at your party and he's like, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" I don't know, Frank.
It would be one thing too, like the delivery of the line as well was like, it was very 80s sincere. It was not like smoldering. Like it wasn't. It was like, do you believe in love at first sight? Because I think you should, because I'm going to love you forever and ever and ever, and I'll never let you go.
Wow.
This could be another horror movie.
That sounds creepy.
I think Mary read a little more into it than we did.
Because I am a woman
screwed up my understanding
who's single.
Yeah,
that sounds creepy.
But you know what? If you think about the character arc, I mean, he now believes in romance, right? He believes in love.
Then the thing to say is, hey, I was going down to Trafalgar Square for some funnel cake. Do you want to come and get some funnel cake? That's how you do this conversation. You don't... I need to take this guy aside and tell him how to ask a secretary out.
That's right.
I want like dating advice with Jason Henderson.
I really,
my advice is 30 years out of date.
Don't take dating advice to Jason.
Yeah.
Because RoboCop is the first date movie. Jason.
No, but
although maybe you should, because Julia married him. So
right.
It's a valid question though, because it's like, how many people in real life? I was willing to just dismiss it because it's a movie, but how many people in real life would get away with something like that? Do you believe in love at first sight? It's like, okay,
none.
Come on.
If I went on a date with someone and they led with, do you believe in love at first sight? I would say, absolutely not, and I will see you never, and walk the other way.
Well, it's like, come on, you know, I just.
It does sound like one of those. Julia and I were looking at the 36 questions, you know, the one that asks you all these questions, but I don't even think it's on that list. You know, the list is all like, you know, who would you want to have dinner with if you know, if you could have dinner with anybody tonight, you know, and it's all that stuff. Any of these would have been a good opening line for this person, but
yeah.
Desi
anyway.
Arnaz went with the unpopular choice.
Yeah, you know, hey, swing and a hit. It worked out. So
that's right. It worked for him.
But you know what redeems it is it's immediately followed by a shot of a waiter who looks suspiciously like Vincent Price passing through the scene.
Yes.
So I have to. Julia pointed out a logical problem here. Obviously this is a thing where he, you know, obviously saw the guy at the club yesterday.
Right. He looks at Vincent Price and he's like, "Whoa, that's the guy from my book. It's a book. There's no guy from your book. Like, it's in your brain." So yeah, I guess you could go, that is kind of what I pictured this guy looking like, but it's not like,
Sure.
I mean, it was just a dumb reaction. That's the thing, is there's so many things.
Maybe he was taken aback because he felt his sanity slipping away.
Maybe.
I think what it is he literally saw Vincent Price dinking around dressed as a waiter, pranking somebody. You know,
Yes.
thought, oh my God, that's Vincent Price, the actor.
Why is Vincent Price pouring drinks at my publisher's club? He's clearly here
it's like, well,
to jack around with somebody. That makes sense.
It kind of reminds me of that movie, Stranger Than Fiction, with Will Ferrell.
Oh yeah,
right where he's like, he finds out that he's like a character
I haven't seen
in a
that.
novel.
What a great idea! I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah,
that was a beautiful one too. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I just have this, you know, idea that most of these folks were working actors in the same vein as, say, Michael Caine, and so, you know, they would take whatever roles came their way, and so maybe Price, you know, was just trolling for a little extra cash that weekend.
I mean, you really do. It's so funny because some of the ridiculous stuff that's thrown into the script is where, like, to me, the worst part of the script is anytime that Desi Arnaz has to say something hip and modern, which is weird because he's the youngest person in the cast. And yet anytime he goes like, I saw North by Northwest, you know, any of that like meta crap, it really falls flat. And I get the impression.
Do you think a funnier actor could have made that stuff work? Because I think as pop culture references in 1983, those were out of date, but at the same time, they went into this movie knowing that they were making something that's old-fashioned. So
I guess so. But my question is, so this is something just ignorant. I need to go watch some earlier versions of this and see like what's been added. I would love to know.
We need to watch the actual old Dark House at some point, because
that's a wonderful movie.
It's so good.
But to Jason's point, this is the seventh film adaptation of that play, and most of them took place in the 20s. Some are in the teens. One of them's in the 30s. I don't know if there was one in the 40s. So it is by its very nature a really old story. You know, I mean, so I don't know. I think I agree. I'd like to see at least the version of it that was made just prior to House of the Long Shadows.
Listening to the director's commentary on the Blu-ray for this, they really were not that interested in adapting. They just wanted something. They wanted the old Dark House, and they couldn't get it, so they got the next best thing.
Okay, that is a good point. That's a really good point.
But I mean,
there is a 1947 film that.
Okay, 47. All right.
And so I got to see it. And that feels, you know, it's only 40 years before this. 35.
Only 40 years. Jason sees time differently than the rest of us.
Totally does. He totally does. I told you that he always rounds up to our whatever it impacts my age. He always rounds up. Oh, we've known each other for 55 years. I'm like, what? I'm not even 50. I don't know. I'm exaggerating, but no, he'll just whatever it is, it's the next decade up. So yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking the other day that Silence of the Lambs came out in 1991, right?
Yep.
And they've just now got this new Clarice, which is that's 30 years later, right? Blink of an eye. There is nobody watching that show who's not going, oh yeah, well I guess, but I mean, it's
well, no, everybody watching that show is like, why aren't we watching Hannibal instead?
Well, but my point is, even with Hannibal, people are like, this is great, but it's hard to fill those Sounds of the Lambs shoes. 30 years ago, man. That's like.
Have you seen? I don't want to turn this into a preemptive endorsement, but have you seen Hannibal?
Oh, yeah,
that shit was good.
It was. Yes. I remember them talking about it too, because they were like, because they didn't. And this is the thing with remakes, right? Where like, or adaptations, where you can either adapt the thing that exists, or you can create something entirely new. In like with like The Thing from Another World in the 50s, and then John Carpenter's in 1980.
81, maybe 82.
Okay, early 80s.
I think you're right. I think it is 81.
There's a really great interview with him where he's like, I love The Thing from Another World. It's one of the best, movies that, it goes on and on and on about how much he loves it. And then in the same breath was like, but we couldn't adapt that. We had to do something different.
Right.
Lest people compare the two.
But just culturally, I firmly believe that a lot of these reworks or television series that are based on characters from a very popular film of decades before, I think that a lot of the audience, at least to begin with, has never seen what the inspiration was. They just watch it as a standalone.
I think with younger people, sometimes that's true. But I mean, Silence of the Lambs is pretty iconic.
I agree.
I guess you're right. But it feels like yesterday. But I mean, I'm not young by any means, right? But
I think if you're talking about somebody that was born in the 90s, though, they might have a different perspective on that.
Right.
And even as somebody that was born in the 70s, like Silence of the Lambs feels like I'm okay with like remixes and remakes, as long as I the paraphrase Tony, there's always room for a good version of something.
Well said.
The only reason why I'm dogging on Clarice is that we already had a really good Hannibal Lecter TV show, and I don't.
But the thing is, Hannibal's not in Clarice. They've actually split.
Why am I watching it then? Nobody watched Silence of the Lambs for Jodie Foster.
That was a good.
I did.
This is a whole other conversation.
I was on mute, but I just screamed at you, Drew. I was like, I love Jodie Foster.
About that. Yeah.
And I think as someone who grew up in the 90s, I remember watching Silence of the Lambs very vividly for the first time. I think I was in high school. And so like because it was rated R, it was
definitely
mature.
rated R.
Pretty grim stuff.
And I remember sitting in my parents' basement screaming at the TV, being like, "Get out of there, Clarice!"
No, Jodie Foster is amazing. I just saw her interviewing about another project that she's doing, and she still looks exactly the same. By the way,
I would not watch a TV show based around that character. Like
we watched the first.
That's the challenge, right?
We watched the first episode, and it's holding up. I'm going to give it a few chances before I decide. But I think it's pretty good. I think it's interesting.
Imagine that
because it's just an FBI show, basically.
Yeah. Imagine.
I like what you like. Not interested.
Okay. None of this. All I'm saying is that it is tough to do a remake of something that reverberates, and in that case, that movie came out 30 years ago, but nobody doesn't know it. It's like trying to say, you know what, I'm going to do a new thing.
Well, that's why they've never done a remake of Jaws.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Right, exactly. We both had the same thought. That movie's from 1975, but nobody would want to say, "Oh, I'm going to go watch the new show Quint," because
they did do Bates Motel, and it was generally well received.
It depends on how good the show is, because I have to be honest with you, and this is a completely different genre, but after Cheers went off and they said, "We're doing a show based on Frasier," I went, "What? Of all the characters on that show, why Frasier? That was a brilliant effing show because Frasier was not the thing. It was all the wonderful characters. Niles, oh my God, brilliant. Like the whole Daphne. I mean, they was just really well written. So if you do the show right, it doesn't matter.
The new Equalizer is
I love
really more a remake of the old television show than it is a remake of the Denzel films. That's from the 80s, and I mean, it's forgotten. Let's be perfectly honest.
Is this the one that had the British actor in it?
Edward Woodward.
Edward.
Who was from Wicker Man.
Correct.
And now we've got Queen Latifah, who is just such a badass.
Yes. She looks awesome in that too.
I'm
so good.
a big fan of the old show.
You are, Scott?
I'm a big fan of the old show.
Where can you watch that? NBC app has. Is
it NBC or CBS? It's actually on. It was actually on tonight. The new one.
Scott might want to qualify that by saying that he's also watching Mannix religiously right now.
I watch Mannix fairly regularly. Yes, that's true.
I got one more thing I want to throw out here. Apropos of somehow either nothing or all of this, but I was thinking about remakes. The Maltese Falcon, 1941. Yep. 1941 is a remake of Satan Let Metal Lady, which came out 5 years earlier.
It was that soon?
Yep. Yeah.
Jason,
people didn't have this. It's not like you could easily rewatch a movie back in the that makes a little more sense.
The Equalizer is on CBS, FYI.
Okay.
I'd be really interested in a comparative study of remakes, where in what decades, how long do you wait for a remake? Because as you said, Jason, this was between the previous version of House of the Long Shadows, it was about 30 years.
Look at you getting us back on topic.
Thank you. Yes.
Woo woo. But I'm really curious to see if that bears out, if there's a pattern.
I don't know. It's a good question.
Well, and of course, it depends upon the gravitas, if you will, of the movie. It's like, as Jason, there's been one remake that was a television movie for a movie like Casablanca.
Right.
There are certain films that most people won't touch because it's become so iconic. Like in my lifetime, I can't imagine somebody making a remake of Chinatown.
So
Lord of the Rings, how do you?
But they are doing that.
But that's the thing. I'm really interested to see how this could be a whole separate episode. But I will keep it very short because I'm a gigantic Tolkien nerd. But it's been 20 years since those movies came out, and they're doing a show now that shows. They're diving into some of the lore in the Silmarillion where it's before Lord of the Rings happens in the Second Age, but it's still going to be, I'm curious to see if I feel some of the way that you all feel about remakes of beloved shows or movies, because there hasn't been a remake of something that I really loved before.
To be honest,
Lord of the Rings.
I always want to see it. This is perverse, but I always want to see it. I'm always interested in seeing somebody's take on something. And then if I don't like it, I find that you forget very quickly that it even exists.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because most remakes, if they're less than, they simply don't hold up and they're forgotten.
Oof. You just forget. Like Jackie Earl Haley played Freddy Krueger. I don't know if people,
I actually think, controversial statement, I actually think he was fine in that movie. It's just the movie itself was dreadfully dull and unimaginative. How can you make a boring Freddy Krueger movie? Even the terrible ones aren't dull.
That's a great
sweet. Gosh, we have got to wrap this up, or we're going to lap ourselves somehow.
Jason, did we break your show? I'm sorry.
No, this has been so fun.
I blame Scott.
This is the show. This is appropriate for the movie, because the movie is teaming up all these grand horror stars for this rambling crazy movie. Wow. So we have to have a rambling crazy episode.
That's a nice transition.
Well, would you mind if I just very briefly spoke to this because we're now doing the podcast equivalent of a long Midwestern goodbye. We made a cocktail for tonight that was inspired by Vincent Price's cookbook,
which I have right here.
Yes, Mary's holding it in her very hand.
Oh, cool! So
I made what's called a Hanaho, which supposedly, according to his book, it means "come again" in Hawaiian. But at any rate, it's It's delectable. It is essentially 1 1/4 ounces of light rum, 2 1/4 ounces of pineapple juice, juice of half a lime, half a cup of crushed ice. You put that into your shaker, shake the hell out of it, and then pour it into a tall glass.
That sounds like my kind of drink.
Yeah, it's quite nice. Top it off with
wonderful, yeah.
3/4 ounces of dark rum and decorate it with a maraschino cherry and an orange slice. I made one for myself. I've been sipping it throughout the episode. It's quite nice. It really is. So once again, that was a Vincent Price inspired, if you will, cocktail recipe, which we thought would be appropriate for the occasion.
And Dave, there's a great little bit in the book because he writes for every recipe in this particular book, which is Scott's book, actually, that I've been borrowing. He writes a little blurb, and about this he says, so Hanaho, they tell me, means come again, but I've never been able to figure out if it means to come again to the Hana Maui or to come again on the rum punch. You couldn't lose either way.
Well, when we wrap up, I'm going to make myself another one of these in the Deep Dark Lounge. It's kind of a nightcap.
Nice.
Beautiful. All right. So I don't know if we want to get final thoughts, but let's combine them. I'd love to hear your endorsements. You can give a final thought, but really I just want to hear your final thoughts for the whole show and endorsements. And we'll go the same order we went before, which was, let me make sure I've got it.
You started with Drew.
It was Drew, Mary, Tony, Scott, Julia, David. So, Drew, so what do you have to endorse? And if you want to have any final thoughts, you are welcome to.
Well, my final thoughts are, first of all, this was just wonderful and the perfect antidote, I should say, not anecdote. English is hard. Antidote to the last week that I have had. Which was very stressful, to say the least. So to come back around and spend some time with you delightful people talking about a nostalgic movie for me was wonderful. And, the movie itself, yes, it's a very, very silly movie if you look at it objectively. But I think it's a lot of fun, and it's certainly invited some fun conversation. So to that point, I am endorsing the Blu-ray of this movie, which was put out by Kino Lorber Classics, and it's got a great commentary by Pete Walker. It's got another commentary by a film historian, David Duvall, and it's got a nice little making of commentary. It's a high definition cleanup, and it's got the cool looking VHS artwork that I was talking about.
I like that artwork.
There,
nice.
Which all the people taking part in the podcast can see, but I'll post pictures of it.
That's
and
awesome.
they also put out a this is a movie I have never seen, but everybody who knows me knows that I'm an aficionado of Universal horror movies. So I've always wanted to see this movie, Curse of the Undead, which is a vampire western from 1959, but it's been out of print for a while. But they just put out this Blu-ray, and my lovely wife was kind enough to get it for me as a Valentine's Day gift. So tomorrow I'm finally going to bust that out and finally get to see get my vampire cowboy fix.
Woo-hoo!
So those are my endorsements.
That sounds really great. Yeah. That's fabulous. Wow. Mary, first of all, thank you for being on, and final thoughts and endorsements. What do you have for us?
Thank you for having us, and thank you for letting us derail so many conversations tonight. This has really been so much fun. I really enjoyed this movie, mostly for the dynamic between Carradine, Lee, Cushing, and Price. I just think having all of them in one movie together is so special. And that being said, I would like to highly endorse 2 books that I have read. Both by 2 stars of the movie. One is Peter Cushing, The Complete Memoirs. Peter Cushing wrote a number of memoirs. You can find a copy on Amazon that has them all together. It's written as he speaks, and it's wonderful, and includes really great pictures of his youth and growing up and his time with Hammer Films, and really shows how seriously he took a sort of often maligned genre during the time. And I think it's really lovely, and he talks about his friendships. And of course, Christopher Lee. And Christopher Lee's autobiography, The Lord of Misrule, which is wonderful because he, of course, has a million fascinating stories, being like the son of an Italian noblewoman and eating dinner with two of Rasputin's assassins and killing Nazis in Africa. Like, there's so much, and then his career on top of that. But they both talk so much about their relationship with one another, and I really think that their friendship was something special, and I'm really excited to send you all of these links of Christopher Lee talking about his friendships with Vincent Price and Peter Cushing, because I think it's really wonderful and reminds me a lot of my friendship with my two dear co-hosts, Dave and Scott.
Oh,
that's very sweet. If I only
cool.
I could be so noble.
Indeed.
You undersell yourself, sir.
That's wonderful.
I love it.
Thank you very much. Tony.
Of course, she did earlier say that there was nothing more noble than a possum, so, you know.
That's true.
That's an excellent point. An excellent point.
I would also like
the
to
new
take
co-host
to endorse possums.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
No such endorsement from me.
That's awesome. Like, it's up to you, Dave, to put a mic out for the possum for future episodes of Monster of Happy Hour.
I'm there, Tony. I'll do it for you, man.
Like I said, I think I had fun with this movie. I am not a huge fan of the it was all a dream trope. Mm-hmm. It's been done well. Different people have handled it well, but for the most part, I personally tend to feel like, why did I just watch that then? Like, right. There were no stakes, and I know that it's the journey, but that's in general kind of my feeling on a lot of movies that end this way, and that's my own thing. But the cast is amazing, and I just having everybody together in this, and I agree with Drew. Like, it is fun to do this in this setting where we have all our friends here talking about this. I think that's really awesome. I had a lot of fun with the movie. And there's just such cool performances. Some parts of me wish that it was perhaps a different film or a better film that they were all in. But the fact that it takes what we have and elevates it is really interesting to watch as well. So absolutely. I think that's really great. It was really cool. I hadn't seen it before, and it was great to share it with everybody. I definitely enjoyed it. I wish that it was streaming more easily. I mean, you can get the Blu-ray, and to Drew's point though, Kino Lorber has put out a lot of really cool stuff, and they're continuing. Like, they're quickly one of my favorite distributors. They've done a lot of just awesome stuff. Especially recently, but their whole releasing, their whole distribution thing is just great. Like, there's so much good film that they're putting out and have put out. So I definitely, that's part of my endorsement is, go on the Kino Lorber site or go to Diabolic DVD also carries their stuff, I think. But I tend to try to, things being what they are, I tend to try to go to the site where possible if it's something I can easily go to and order from, especially if they have deals on shipping and that kind of thing. So I do recommend going directly to the site if you can, even though Amazon's pretty easy for a lot of people. It's just something I try to go direct just because it matters more lately, over this past year, right?
Here.
But as far as endorsements go, I can't remember if last time if I endorsed talked about it before, but the movie Shadows, the martial arts movie, but I just got to watch it on UHD and was reminded at just how awesome it looks. And there's some sequences, as a person who watches tons of martial arts films, there's a couple of things. Even Rain was like, that part was so cool. and she's less into the genre than I am. She makes a really good kind of every person viewer. So if she thinks it's really cool, I have a feeling that more people will go, wow, that was really awesome. But it's the cinematography in the movie kind of plays with that light and shadow, and a lot of it is very almost black and white, or looks like ink prints. And they use that motif throughout. But that's the one thing. I mean, and that's one of the last things I really watched. That hasn't, this, especially this week, because we even turned off as much as, even though we had electricity, we tried to conserve what we could. So
Right.
we were keeping it to a bare minimum. I've watched a few things here and there when we could, but that's the last thing I really sat down and, paid really close attention to. And the other thing I will endorse that we kind of talked about it, but through all of this, it's been really complicated. There's a lot about the situation that's complicated, and a lot of I understand that not everybody will understand how everything happened. But I'm still going to advocate empathy and compassion. Like, to me, one of the more frustrating things has been if your first thought is not, how do I put this? Your first thought should be, I hope everybody's okay. If your first thought is instead, I should do some kind of grandstanding in the midst of tragedy, I don't like that tact. And I've been very frustrated with that this week. I understand where people are coming from, and sometimes it's from a place of like, I want to help, and I think that I should call out against injustice, for example. But that empathy and compassion I see less and less on social media, and I advocate that, and I've been bad about this as well. I'm not saying I'm not guilty. But just, I don't know, be cool, be empathetic, find out maybe how you can help, because help isn't necessarily grandstanding while things are tragic. And I know that's probably sounds preachy again. I hope that's not it, but that's where I've been at. And it's been, Rain and I have been really lucky, but when I see that just doesn't help. So that I'm advocating, like, take a step back. And again, I've had discussions where I've been very jangly nerves and went off, but just let's try to work together. I think this is a time for me, like with all of us together in this, I feel like that's part of why I'm advocating for this. Again, I don't know, thanks for humoring me, but that's been mainly what's on my mind lately, especially.
I think that was very profound. I think that was wonderful. Yeah,
great.
I really appreciate it. Gosh, well, Scott, you want to follow that?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not going to be nearly as profound. And I've been, over the past week, I've been watching primarily films of two filmmakers. And one of them is not of the horror genre, and the other one is of the horror fantasy. So I've been watching a number of Ray Harryhausen films. And specifically, I watched one that I'd never seen before. I watched Earth versus the Flying Saucers. And
didn't we do an episode on that, Drew? Earth versus Flying Saucers? I think the answer.
He's muted.
Okay, I'm interrupting you.
We did. We did do Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Sorry.
It's I'm not saying anything profound, so I don't mind being having interjections. So anyway, all I would say is, for those of your listeners, and I doubt that there are many, but for those of your listeners who are unfamiliar with Ray Harryhausen, pick up any one of his films just to see really great stop motion, which is no longer a technique that most people are using, but it's masterfully done. And the other one is, I've been watching films from a film director, John Boorman. And John Boorman, the two films that I most recently watched, which were about 10 years apart, were Point Blank, which is a movie with Lee Marvin where he plays a syndicate killer, more or less. And it that description really doesn't do it justice, but this is a film that's studied very often in film schools for shots, cuts, those sorts of things. It's a great film.
So is Grosse Point Blank an homage to that, you think?
No.
No. You don't think so?
No.
No. Okay.
And there's another film made in the 80s called Point Blank that has nothing to do with this one either. And then the other movie, which is both notorious and famous by Boorman, is Zardoz, which is the movie famously with Sean Connery and the barely there red sort of thong outfit. And it's a very much a product of its time. It's very strange, but I would contend, not unlike this film, even though it's very strange, it's very compelling. and worth watching. So
this past Halloween, I think it was this Halloween and the one before, a friend of mine went as the Zardoz head, and his kid had the Sean Connery outfit.
Wow.
That's incredible.
And they even had little cardboard guns that he could throw out of the Zardoz head.
Cool.
It was a really amazing costume.
That's cool. But
how many people seeing them trick or treat got it?
Exactly.
Enough, but it did take off. Like a bunch of people saw it on Twitter later.
Really?
And that was kind of cool.
That's great.
Yeah, it was it was done really well. I'll have to send you guys if I can find the pics, but it was really good. Wow. That's a weird movie, but it is cool. And I will also shield for Harryhausen anytime. I was watching I was getting out Sinbad Blu-rays recently, which, man, there's so much cool stuff in those Sinbad movies.
Yep, absolutely.
The gift that keeps on giving.
We watched a lot of Harryhausen when my older daughter was very small, because we watched a lot of his. He made a whole series of fairy tale adaptations in stop motion at his studio, and his Big Bad Wolf is terrifying. It's huge, enormous wolf. Is great. Just really wonderful.
So Tony just sent a picture of the thing he was talking about, and it is ridiculous. Oh my gosh, you have to post that on the Facebook, because that's amazing.
That's great.
I literally Googled Zardoz Halloween costume, and this came up. So Tony, if this is your friends, they're famous on the internet.
Wow.
Crazy.
All right. So I'm sorry. I've lost track of.
I mean, that is it. That's Max.
Oh, Mary. I'm sorry. Mary's the one who sent it. I thought Tony
sorry,
sent
Jason.
No.
Yeah. No. But that's totally true, and that's Max Meehan, who's been on our show. Good friend of mine. So
fantastic.
Yeah,
but that's
fantastic.
The one that Mary sent is your friend, Tony.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, wow. So yeah, they are famous. They have the best Zardoz costumes in the whole country in recent memory. That's amazing.
Maybe the only Zardoz costume.
Yes. Julia, what about you?
I don't really have anything else more to say about the film. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I just love talking with you guys. It's really just such a bright spot in what has otherwise been not as bright a year as we had hoped it would start off to be, but there's some good things about this 2021, but this has been definitely a tough week, seeing my friends and family struggle. But this has been really fun. My endorsements, I was actually going to endorse The Equalizer because I do think Queen Latifah is such a badass. Also, Jason and I have been watching Your Honor with Bryan Cranston. It's a really good show, very suspenseful. And then the thing I'm obsessed with is actually an app and a website called radio.garden for the website, and then you get the app. It is the coolest thing ever. It's just Google Earth, and you just click on a dot somewhere on Google Earth, and it's a radio station that is playing at that moment in that place in the planet. So like one of the ones I went to was I'm like, let's just see what's going on in Africa. And I picked a dot, and literally there is, like, you cannot see anything but trees for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles around this dot. I don't know if it's a village that's just so wooded that it looks like it's covered with trees, or if it's like a couple of guys that have a radio station. But I'm like, what? How is this even a thing? It's amazing to just kind of drop in and listen to the ads and the people talking and the music. Unfortunately, way too many of these stations are playing awful American 80s music, but
yes.
A lot of them are playing, like, I was really disappointed because I love Brazilian music, and then I go into Brazil and I cannot find a single station playing Brazilian music in Brazil. But anyway, today I was walking around Target listening to Cuban music and dancing through the aisles. It was really fun. So that's my main endorsement.
That's really great. I love that. Thank you. David, what about you? What do you have to recommend for us?
I actually want to recommend a podcast. I guess you'd call it a podcast. It's by Diana Prince, who is Darcy the Mail Girl.
Right.
On the last drive-in. So this is Kinky Horror, and it's Geek Talk. GEEK space TAWK. And it's basically her talking with, in some cases, John Bloom, Joe Bob. She just recently did one where she was talking with Rhonda Shearer from, Up All Night. She did a Valentine's Day wrap-up with Joe Bob a couple days ago. And what I really like about it is she just has this boundless enthusiasm for the genre and is relentlessly positive. And I know that Scott and Mary and myself, we've sort of fallen in love with Diana Prince. And, a few months ago, she did one called Keeping It Real, Fake Parts, Real Heart, the follow-up, in which she talked about the online harassment she'd been getting and about her body dysmorphia and just how it was just destroying her. And it just really hurt, It hurt us to see people treating her that way.
This episode, where was this commentary that she did?
This would have been 5 months ago.
On her podcast?
On her podcast.
Okay.
And she posted a picture of herself without makeup, which we don't normally see, and she's obviously been crying. And I think, oh my God. So we just continue to fall in love with this woman. And it has very little to do with her appearance and everything to do with her heart, her enthusiasm for the genre and for the fans. Mm-hmm. So that my endorsement would be Geek Talk by Diana Prince.
Thank you very much. That's really cool. Thank you. Tony, there was something else that you wanted to point out. What was that?
Oh, yeah. I almost forgot just because everything's been going on. But, from time to time, we get sent things and people go, hey, check this out. There's a short film, and I have to get the links because it's been released this week, but obviously during everything else going on, called The Wheel. And I really thought it was cool. It looks great. It was a cool take. There's some subtle things that it does and some not so subtle things that it does. And I can't wait to post about where it's been released. The director was cool enough to send us, a link to watch it pre-release. And I think more horror fans will really dig this. Some of the people who were involved in the Conjuring and such like that were involved in this. And there's more stuff coming out. We'll post the whole, all the info on the Facebook page. But as soon as I get all of that, I'm going to say, check out this short film, The Wheel. It was nice and creepy.
That's cool.
And that, when you watch a lot of horror and something kind of gives you the chills or makes your hair stand up a little bit, that's no mean feat. So I got to give it up. But yeah, we'll definitely post more about it on the page and on Twitter, because I thought it was well worth everybody checking out, and it looks great, sounds great, gave me the chills, and again, anytime that happens, somebody's doing something right. So I'm gonna also endorse the short film The Wheel, and I felt bad because we were supposed to talk about it last week. Obviously that didn't happen, so I want to make sure that people know about this film. As soon as I get all of the because it hadn't been released yet, as soon as I get all of that, I'll post it and send that out to everybody.
Wow. Okay, so first off, I'm just so thankful. This has been a really great evening. I've really enjoyed just hanging out with you guys from Austin, knowing that you're I don't know, that you've come through this particular storm, and we're just so thankful that you're there, and for your wisdom and for your friendship. And for my friends of the Monster Movie Happy Hour, I'm so glad that you would join us. It was a blast.
We always have a good time with you guys.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I don't think you can know how much have all been looking forward to this. It's been the highlight of the last week here.
This has probably been the highlight of February, to be totally honest.
Yeah, no pressure, of course, but yeah.
No, I feel the same, and it's good because I think we're gonna probably take a little break for a while until around the time that King Kong versus Godzilla comes out. So this has been a good way to head into our mid-season hiatus. I got one thing I want to endorse, which is it's called The Comeback. We mentioned it earlier. The Comeback, aka Encore, aka I think it's called When the Screaming Stops. Is that right? And anyway, 1978, The Comeback came out, and it's basically just like House of Long Shadows, only it's about a musician, but Sheila Keith is in there, and it's more slashery and it's more 60s-ish. There's bright colors, and it's in contemporary London. Well, 78, and it stars Jack Jones, who was like a big sort of lounge singer type in the late 70s. You will most know him as the voice of the Love Boat theme. So if you've ever looked for a slasher that stars Jack Jones, this is your chance. And you can rent it on Prime, and it's called Encore. The version they have is called Encore, but I saw it originally as The Comeback. So whatever, it doesn't matter. I love this film. So thank you very, very much. I'm so thankful. Everybody get plenty of sleep. I know that we've kept you all up, that we've been at this now for a number of hours. And
that was always going to be the case, Jason.
Nobody's really surprised, are they?
So thank you. Yeah, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I really appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.